Welcome everyone to Asian Pacific Voices Radio, where you'll find stimulating conversations that explore diverse topics and stories impacting our communities. I'm your host, Sheena Yap Chan. Joining me today is our special guest, Tricia Lee. Tricia Lee is an award-winning filmmaker known for her unique storytelling style and ability to create impactful, thought-provoking films. With over a decade of experience in the film industry, Tricia has directed and produced several critically acclaimed movies tackling topics ranging from mental illness and addiction to female empowerment and gender equality. Her work has been recognized with numerous accolades, including several festival awards and nominations, and she is widely regarded as one of the most promising and innovative voices in Canadian cinema today.
Great. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Yeah, it's such an honor to have you here. First off, I'd love to know what or who inspired you to be a filmmaker?
It's actually, I remember when I was a kid, my parents wanted me to be a doctor. And I told them, I want to be a psychiatrist. And so they're like, fantastic, we're going to get you into med school. But then they took me on vacation to Universal Studios in Florida. And I saw behind the scenes how movies were made. And I came back from that trip and I was like, I want a career in media. And they were like, oh goodness, what have we done? So it was that was the start of it. I mean, I just really liked storytelling, and the whole psychiatrist part of it is I just like to talk about feelings and the things that people are going through, and I like to do that through film.
I love that. I know it's not always, our parents' dreams when we say we want to do something that's not a lawyer or a doctor, right? When you say media, it's like, how are you going to pay the bills, right?
Yeah, sure.
And being a creative, especially in Asian culture, is not something that's typical. So I'm glad, you went ahead and did something that you loved. So I hear that your latest project involves the William Hung American Idol biopic that you had written. How did you approach capturing his unique story and personality?
So I met William in person, just at an event, and it kind of just occurred to me that I kind of have always been fascinated by his story. So I approached him and I said, I'd really like to tell your story, if you'll give me permission. And so I spent months interviewing him. And I basically I wanted to know every detail of everything since he was born. So we probably spoke for a good 5 days before we even got to him going to American Idol. And just I love being able to get to know somebody that thoroughly. And a lot of it was just processing the story through my brain, my body, my creativity to parse out what I think the nugget is of the story that I wanted to tell about him. And I think the biggest thing that I learned from him, and that I think is the nugget of the movie that I wrote, is that no matter how you see me, I have value. Because if we all remember, people were laughing at him, and no matter how the world saw him, he still stood up and was like, I do have value, and I want to sing, and I want to entertain, and I want to make people happy, and that really came from a real place.
I love that. And I mean, I follow him on Instagram and he's done so well. He's, speaking all across the world. And it's great to see that, sometimes, we're defined by that one thing, right? Like for him, American Idol. I mean, he could have just said, everyone sees me as a joke. Instead, he took himself seriously and started a career and utilized that to build a speaking career, right? Being able to speak words into people's lives and make a better difference, right? A positive
Exactly.
impact.
Yeah. And turning a failure into something that, using his platform to be able to talk to people about following their dreams, and, making the best out of something that, frankly, if that was me, I would have been crushed on national television, but I think there's something to learn from that.
Yeah, and everything happens for a reason for sure, right? So I'm glad that, he's able to do something different where he can impact people for the better.
Mm.
So, Tricia, as an AAPI female filmmaker, how have you found your perspective and cultural background has influenced your storytelling?
I realized that when I was a kid, I actually tried to move away from my culture. I grew up in Canada, and I grew up in a pretty white neighborhood, one of only two Asian kids. And, and actually, instead of feeling like an outsider, I did my best to belong. So I erased my culture from myself. Like I was like, I'm not going to speak Cantonese ever again. I'm going to speak English without an accent. And I just tried to assimilate, if I'm going to be honest. And so I think that, in 2020 or in recent years when Asian, and I think, people of all colors their stories are being told more. I sort of looked at myself and my culture that I really hadn't been a part of, and I think so. A lot of my stories are about that exploration of what I erased and why I erased it. And I'm trying to be as honest as I can and find my culture through my writing now at this, many many years later.
I love that. And I also am from Canada. I currently live in Toronto. I've been here since I was 7. And so I totally understand what you mean by trying to assimilate to Western culture. I never saw anybody in the media that looked like me.
Mm,
And it was really hard to embrace being Asian at the time, right? I wanted to have blonde hair, blue eyes. I wanted to change my name because I just, wanted to denounce being Asian because I just didn't feel beautiful.
mm,
And this is why representation is so important, having, specific stories that's told by our culture because for so long we've been so invisible, right? So I love that you're able to do that, be able to tell the stories that we were too embarrassed to when we were growing up, right? And
yeah.
I mean, Toronto is one of the most multicultural cities in the world, but it's unfortunate that we still don't have that representation that we deserve. So I'm glad that you are doing something that's totally different, that's impacting our community. And so I'm just curious, what was your experience like when you were directing top talent such as Eva Longoria and Simu Liu in your past projects?
Um, I mean, it was great to work with. I met Simu when he was on Kim's Convenience. This was before he moved to the States, and we shot Meeting Mommy together. And he had written co-written that script, um, and we just I just loved being able to work with him. So I don't know if you've seen the short Meeting Mommy, but it's about the death of a parent, and I had recently experienced that. So, like as a director, I like to approach things from a really personal place. And having recently lost my mother, like I shared that story with him, just to to get him to that place for like a certain scene. And I just love being able to be that open with my actors. So that was fantastic. And Eva was great. It was a commercial that we shot, and she's a one take wonder.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And sorry to hear about your mom. It's not always easy to lose a parent, right? Um, so yeah. So you've directed 3 award-winning features, including Blood Hunters and Silent Retreat. What do you believe sets these films apart from others in their respective genres?
um, I Yes, they are horror films. I like to say that they're elevated genre or dramatic horror, if you will. There's definitely blood, guts, and monsters, but I am actually really a dramatic director, and the stories that I like to tell are really philosophical and thematic. And so, Silent Retreat, for instance, yes, it's a creature feature, but it's also about women standing up and using their voices. And so, what I love about genre is that we get to use it as a metaphor for humanity or social issues, and so that's the type of genre film that I like to make.
I like that perspective that you have because as women, we have to like lift our voices up. We have to like face all our monsters,
Mm,
right?
mhm.
And just being able to showcase that through a movie to show them that we have that power, whatever that genre is, even in horror. It teaches us that, hey, we can do it. We can speak up, we can stand up, and we can make a difference. So I really love that you're able to utilize that for something good, to have a positive message and to show others what's possible. So I good chance your feature script being produced by Janet Yang, who's phenomenal. I've actually interviewed Janet Yang a
Oh.
few years back, yeah, on my own podcast, has been recognized on the Blacklist, the Cape List, and other high profile competitions. What was your inspirations behind creating this particular story?
So I'll tell you what the story is about. It's about a transgender teen who helps an undocumented Asian woman escape deportation, and they form this unlikely friendship that helps them heal the rifts in their own mother-daughter relationships. And so the inspiration was a phone call that I received. It was a wrong number phone call from a teenage boy, and I was like, sorry, wrong number, and then I hung up. And then about 2 minutes later, the same person called me back, and I was like, oh, sorry, it's still me. But we ended up talking for a while, and at the end of the conversation, I said, "What's your name?" And he said, "I'd like to be referred to as Rachel." And I just got the sense that she wanted to talk to a stranger about things that she wasn't able to tell her own family. So that's sort of like the inspiration for the inciting incident of the script, and then it's also very much me exploring my relationship with my mother, and working through all of that through my writing.
I love that. I mean, of course, when we have Asian parents, there's always a complicated relationship, right? A lot of baggage, a lot of trauma, even intergenerational trauma. And, being able to showcase that through a film or through media, it just helps other people realize we're not the only ones dealing with
Mm,
that.
yes.
When you look at films like The Joy Luck Club or Turning Red, it's the same thing. It talks about those complicated relationships between mother and daughter. And most of the time it's because we just don't want to communicate with each other how we're feeling,
Mm,
because that's how we were raised.
yeah.
It's a whole thing. It gets crazy, right? And if we just basically opened up to each other, things would have been a lot easier. So I think that's great that you've been able to, have your film in so many different high profile lists, and then having it produced by Janet Yang, who's literally like the godmother for Asian Americans in Hollywood. She's out there paving the way. So, I mean, congrats to that. And as an Asian American, how has your journey influenced the way you approach storytelling and pursuing creative opportunities?
I don't look at it that way. I'm just me, and I work as hard as I would regardless. I, contact the people who I would regardless. So, um, I just think that filmmaking it's a really hard hill to climb for anybody. And I don't know any other experience, right? Like, I don't know that my experience would have been any different if I was a different race or a different gender. So, um, honestly, I just try and do the best that I can and make the films that matter to me.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, sometimes, we just want to show up as ourselves, right? Regardless of gender, regardless of race. We just have the stories that we want to tell, and each person has a specific story that you want to tell. And, I always say our specific stories matter, because
Mm,
it's our specific stories that creates solutions and different perspective on life, right? If we have the same storyline over and over again, nothing gets changed. So yeah, so thanks for sharing that. So you are or will be the showrunner and sole writer on 8 episodes of the animated anthology A Banquet for Hungry Ghosts. What drew you to this project, and what can audiences expect from it?
so this is a lovely story. Well, it's an animated anthology, so it's actually 8 stories. That's based on the book A Banquet for Hungry Ghosts. And it's being produced by 108 Media, who hired me to create the Bible and the pilot for the series. And basically, it's ghost stories, Chinese ghost stories that are sort of encapsulated around a Chinese dish. So each story has a recipe and a ghost story that has to do with some sort of dish or food. So yeah, I think it's going to be delicious. I think it's going to be, scary and all of that mixed together. So I hope you look forward to it.
Awesome. That sounds interesting. And of course, as Asians, we love food, right? Any kind of storytelling with food is always a winner. Like, I remember watching this Taiwanese show on Netflix, and it's all about, cooking, a mother cooking meals for her kids, right? But it's more complicated than that, of course, right? But food was the center around it. And then at the end of the show, they would have a recipe for the food they cooked in that show. So if it was a stew, if it was a soup, if it was like a fried dish, they would have a tutorial at the end to show you how they cooked it, which is really fun.
Amazing. And I do want to say that shout out to the author Chang Compestine, who wrote it. She's from China. I think she moved to San Francisco. And so she has like the perspective of living in both worlds. And she brings that to this ghost stories.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to see that and see what dishes are you going to come up with for each episode. And now, as a female filmmaker, has there been any challenges you faced, and if so, how were you able to overcome them?
Look, I feel like I've actually been very fortunate that I um, have produced my own films. So I've had the luxury of choosing the people that I work with, and so I've really generally worked with really great people. So as again, the question of like as a female filmmaker, I don't know any other experience. I just know that I have had a good experience, and like I've raised the money myself. I have produced it. I have hired the people. So I think that that might be a different experience than many other people in the industry who've been hired into jobs that maybe they don't have a choice of who they work with, or how HR may or may not deal with any situations. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get my next feature off the ground. I directed Blood Hunters, my third feature, we were on set 2015. So it's been a while. It came out in 2017, and I am really, working to get that next feature off the ground. People say that this is a great time for female filmmakers. Everybody's open to it, and that's fantastic and great. And I would like to make my next feature. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I love that you mentioned that, you're out there fundraising for your films, right? And I think that's what most people don't understand. Like, you got to go out there and create the opportunities that you want. If you want to create something and you don't have the funds, you're going to find a way to make the money or fundraise that money. And that's not always easy, of course, right? Asking people for money to fund your movie or fund your film. It takes a lot of confidence and courage. And then culturally, it's considered a handout or a weakness. When in reality, it's not. I mean, you're here trying to tell stories, specific stories, empowering our community. So it's all going for the greater good. And, you are very passionate about your work. So that it's going to go somewhere. So like when you mentioned, like you have to fundraise, I just thought, that, wow, that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of confidence, day in and day out. Yeah. So, so I just wanted to commend you on that.
thank you.
No worries. So what advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers looking to break into the industry?
Well, if you're a director, direct. If you're a writer, write. And I know it's easier said than done for directing, because writing you only need a laptop and an internet maybe. So definitely work on your craft. But if you're a director, go out with your iPhone and some friends on the weekend and shoot something. So much of what I learned is in the doing. Like, yes, I went to film school, but where I really learned is on set, even just, student films. And getting to know people, relationships is so important. And especially working relationships where, you on a short film, you can see how you can collaborate and, find your style as well. And I think that's so important to just do it, even if it's not going to be a big festival film, or if it's not, like big budget with all the, bells and whistles, do the craft. And then I guess the other piece of advice is express yourself. Don't try and make something that you're trying to fit the zeitgeist or fit what people are looking for, because that's going to change. And depending on who you're speaking to, that's always different. But I think what will shine through is when you are speaking from your heart and talking about what's important to you. I think that your authenticity will shine through when you're doing that.
I love that advice that you mentioned. You just basically start with what you have, right? Because a lot of people feel like if they want to be a filmmaker, they need to have the best camera. If they want to be a photographer, they need to have the most expensive camera. I'm not saying the iPhone isn't cheap, but you could start with your phone, right? Like I remember talking to a photographer and she said the same thing. Like before she had a fancy camera, she started with her iPhone. I also interviewed a music artist from the Philippines who shot her whole music video on an iPhone, and it still racked up millions of views, right? And so when she told me that she did everything through her iPhone, I was like, seriously? Like that's amazing, right? So it's just proof that you don't always have to have the most expensive items. You just start with what you have, you be resourceful, and you figure things out along the way. And as you get better, you start leveling up, right? You invest in better equipment. You take classes. You do whatever, right? So I love that you mentioned that, and I think sometimes people kind of overthink that they always have to have the best thing, when in reality they just got to start and just start imperfect, and
Yeah.
you'll figure things out.
A piece of advice that I had heard once is that it doesn't matter if you have $5 or $5 million, you can always choose where you put the lens and how you frame the shot. And yes, you can have different like lenses that does cost money. I get it, but like you get the idea. Like it's about creating a frame that tells the story that you want to tell.
Yeah, I love that. So thanks for that great advice. Now, I know we've been talking about you filmmaking and making movies and writing scripts, but I mean, what do you do when you're not making films?
Which is so rarely that I'm not writing. Um, I love to travel. So I've taken on like being a digital nomad, and sometimes I will travel, and I can write from anywhere as long as I bring my laptop. So yeah, travel and see the world while I can.
I love that. And of course, because you're in filmmaking, it also allows you to travel to these amazing places that you've been to. I mean, what was one of your favorite places that you were able to travel to?
So my bucket list place that I just went to is Iceland. It was just beyond beautiful. I mean, of course, I went to go and see the Northern Lights, which I was very fortunate, and I was able to see it on our first time out. But like the ice caves and the waterfalls, and I just they're indescribable. Everybody, you need to go to Iceland. It's just so beautiful. I want to go back.
Awesome. I'm glad you're able to check that off your bucket
Mhm.
list. And Trisha, looking ahead, what can we expect from you in terms of upcoming projects and collaborations?
Well, the projects that we were talking about are, very much on the front burner to try and get them made. I also co-wrote a script called American Dreams, which is a grounded sci-fi thriller. During the pandemic, it was basically me processing my feelings of everything that was happening, um, and I am starting to write a brand new pilot script. I'm also so I'm starting my foray into TV, and so I'm in the Sony TV Writers Fellowship currently. And so I'm going to be starting to write a new pilot that's also in the grounded sci-fi arena. So I'm going to put that out there so that I have to finish it.
I love it. Can't wait to see those upcoming projects that you have. And of course, if our listeners wanted to know a little bit more about you, wanted to connect with you, is there any social media links or any websites we can connect with?
Yeah, my website is tricialeedirector.com. And basically all my socials are Tricia Lee Director.
I want to thank our guest, Tricia Lee, for joining me on today's show. To learn more about Tricia Lee, please visit tricialeedirector.com. We would love to also hear from you, our valued listeners, about any suggestions for future guests or topics. Also, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, as well as follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube channel. Asian Pacific Voices Radio is produced by Asian Culture and Media Alliance, a nonprofit that empowers our Asian and Pacific Islander communities with a voice through media arts. If you would like to support our program, please visit AsianPacificVoicesRadio.com. I'm Sheena Yap Chan, and thank you for listening. Please join us next week for another exciting and thought-provoking Asian Pacific Voices Radio show. Until then, take care, everyone.